Hi, everyone. Welcome. If you don't have your journal out, feel free to pull that out now. We're on page 50. Pardon me. Welcome. I'm glad that you're all here today. So just take a moment as our centering, and whether you like to close your eyes for this part or whether you like to just gaze down. There's also research around gazing up, looking up. So as you walk around campus, if you spend time looking at the sky or at the tops of the trees or at the tops of the cool architecture of all the different buildings on campus, the idea of looking up helps us to reach up outside of ourselves and to access different points of our brain, ways of thinking. It gets us a little bit outside of our own stories, the idea of looking up. So when we do these centerings that help us to focus on the choices that we have or the way that we're going to show up in life, in everything these days, the idea of closing our eyes helps us to center in one way, or gazing down, thinking about what's happening with emotions inside of us. That's another thing. But then gazing up gives us this opportunity to be in a different way, different focus of our lives. So when we do these centerings, you can choose what feels right to you, what feels good in your body, what feels like what your brain needs right now. So thinking about all of those choices and just focusing for a moment on the beauty of your aliveness. We talked last week about these connections that we have to all these cycles, all these different ways that we are part of the natural world, and that the natural world is equally, if not even more than we realize, part of us. And so acknowledging that really beautiful, balanced relationship of how we are part and it is part, and together we make a whole, can be a really beautiful thing. Today we're going to continue with that idea. This is Humans in the Cycle Part 2. But before that, we're going to just watch this really quick video. It's part of a series, so if this intrigues you, this series that you can find on YouTube by Conservation International, this is just one of many. They're all very short and very compelling. So thank you, Scout.
I am home. I give you comfort. I shelter your family. See me for who I am. Home, sweet home. I am your refuge. I am the floor that supports you, the foundation that keeps you steady, the walls that give you shelter, the roof that protects you. I am your home. If you don't take care of me, I cannot take care of you.
So this idea that we are so deeply connected, right? That this is our home and we are part of that. We have been aligned with that for a long time. So as we go through today's class, you can think about that relationship of being at home in this place and what that means for you. We do have the opportunity this week for an extra credit movie that ties into exactly these themes. Extra credit movie Wednesday, February 11th in HHD 355. So jot that down there in your journal. I'll send out a Canvas announcement. So coming up this Wednesday, 7 o'clock in HHD 355, extra credit movie. It's all about this connection, particularly in the world of agriculture, how we can foster that connection rather than actually ignoring the connection. So earth as home, our bodies as earth, our bodies as home. So if we're going to continue this idea of humans in the cycle, part 2, we're going to bring some ideas together from last week and understanding that all of this is continuing to be about your thinking about your thinking, where your stories come from and how you want them to live within you and show up in your lives. Today's particular class is we're going to be focusing on birth and death. So last Wednesday, we ended class with the menstrual cycle, a distinct cycle, right? That's connected for women, for females, to the pull of the moon, right? The cycling every 28 to 29 days, and how the ebb and flow of the tides also relates to the moon. So we are part of that cycle. That author from the Dagara tribe calls the cycle mooning because it is parallel with those cycles of the moon, the waxing and the waning, the changes. So today's class can be a challenging one for people, can be some very sensitive topics. And so if you feel that you should leave class at any point for the well-being of your body and your mind, then I invite you to do that. Consider this sort of a trigger warning that if something triggers you and you feel as though you need to go, then please just go. Because it's challenging. When we think about this process, it can bring up a lot of emotions. It can also bring up a lot of feelings about the process. So considering babies inside, right, we have to consider about how to get them out. So your beliefs about giving birth, I'd like you to write this there in your journal. My belief, I believe that giving birth is ... and you can do that 3 times. Kind of dig in a little bit deeper each time. I believe giving birth is... What sorts of words, what sorts of phrases did you fill in there? Would anyone like to share? She's coming.
I use the word natural.
Natural. So that might tie into some of your discussion post reflections last week about your notion or perception of natural. What other words did you fill in the blanks with? Somebody just want to yell one out, Morgan? A political act. Interesting. Do you want to say more about that?
Birthing another human has become political.
Yes, has become political due to laws around such things. Yes.
I said it can be scary if there's disconnection with giving birth.
Mm-hmm. Scary if there's disconnection. Yeah. I might ask you to say more about that in a little bit. Anyone else? So already there's kind of a variety of ideas about birth, right? Considering that about 300,000 children are born every day on planet Earth, that means there are 300,000 different ways that it happens based on race, religion, socioeconomic factors, history, family history, as well as history of the town or of the tribe. There's cultural norms, there's feelings, there's experiences, there's age, all kinds of different things. No two births are the same. And so considering all of these different things, it actually is quite a beautiful idea that everyone is different, right? Everybody has a story. So the way that I can tell this story is through my own experience. And so please bear with me as I do that. So I was pregnant with my first son when I was 27. I was really excited, feeling really good about it. I was a biology major, so I knew like the science of it. I knew how it was going to happen. I was pretty young. I was pretty fit. I was pretty ready, I thought. And so I did a childbirth class and it gave us a tour of the hospital. So I got familiar with that. And it talked a lot, the childbirth class talked a lot about the medications that I could choose during birth. But I wanted a natural birth. I didn't want to have medications. So I didn't really pay too much attention in that section. I loved being pregnant, right? Feeling that baby, that life growing inside of me, pretty exciting time. And yet I discovered that when it actually came time, all of the things I had prepared for were really surface level. I had not really prepared much of my mind and actually of my body and of my spirit to do something so challenging. So when the time came, I wasn't particularly ready. That evening that labor started, I was 3 days past my due date, and I ate a bunch at my brother's house that evening. We made a birthday cake to hopefully encourage the baby to come, and I just pigged out. And then I felt like I had an indigestion, and yet it turned out it was really labor. And so it started, and it was so intense. And what I learned later is that the intensity of it was because my son Isaac was facing the wrong direction. So the understanding that when babies are inside the womb, when they're ready to birth, then the face of the baby should be against the mother's backbone. So there's soft against hard. But Isaac was backwards. And so the back of his head was against my spine. They call this back labor. And so there was really this intense pain that I wasn't ready for any pain, let alone what I was experiencing. So I went to the hospital very early, and they gave me, they tried to encourage me to relax. They tried to encourage me to walk around. They tried to encourage me, and I couldn't focus on anything but the pain. And so what happened was they gave me all those medications that I was determined not to have. So I got an epidural, which essentially puts your body to sleep from the neck down. It's a shot that goes into your spine and then it just puts you to sleep. So I couldn't feel any of that pain, but I also couldn't feel anything that I was supposed to be doing to birth this child. So then they prepped me for a C-section. They understood that now that medication, all of that goes into the baby's body too. And so his heart rate was struggling. And the challenge of this dance between mother and baby to know when things were to happen was all out of sync. And so what ended up happening is that they did not do a C-section. They ended up putting a vacuum essentially on his head and pulling him out of me, which then led to his stress being very high. He needed to be rushed away. And there I was, left with a lot of emotions. I was really happy that he was safe and that I was safe. But there I was alone. His dad had gone off with him, and there I was all by myself, right? Laying there in the hospital bed, not knowing at all what had just happened. And so that story that I believed that I couldn't relax played out, right? I couldn't relax because that was my story. And so all of these things piled up, right, to lead to this experience that I wasn't planning to have, I didn't want to have, and yet here we are. That's me and Isaac. He wouldn't nurse right away because he was very sluggish from all the drugs that we had received. And so there was stress and worry about that. He needed to be monitored for a significant amount of time because of his life experience so early in his little life. But after all, overall, after some recovery time, we are both okay, right? So let's go back just a moment to that cesarean section that I almost needed, because it becomes the story, the cesarean delivery rate right now in the United States. So this is a graph of the white states are between 21 and 24%. And then there's the blue, these gray states are next, and then the blue states get higher until we get up to these green states where you're at 35 to 38% of women having cesarean sections. So that means that a cesarean section is when they cut the baby out. So all of the stuff through the skin, through the stomach muscles, and into the uterus, and then they're able to just take the baby out. And so that's a pretty major surgery. And to have it happening for between 20 and 38% of birthing women in the United States is pretty remarkable. It's experienced a 6-fold increase over the last 40 years. So reasons for a cesarean section might be there might be health problems in the mother. The mom might be carrying more than one baby, so this happens more often with twins or triplets or more. Could be the size or the position of the baby. Could be that the baby's health is in danger or the mother's health is in danger. Those are all about 5 to 10%. So when cesareans are necessary due to health reasons. But then there are some other things, right, that make cesareans more likely. So like for me, having an epidural early on in labor before the body and the baby are ready is a very common reason to have a C-section. It's an incentive for doctors to do this because it's more efficient. You can schedule a C-section and know exactly when the baby is going to come rather than waiting for that natural time to come along. And it's also seems to be somewhat low priority in our society to emphasize the capacity of the birthing process. We are actually made for this process. And so how is it that we can celebrate that and talk about that, making connections between people who have had experience and people who haven't had that experience? How can the storytelling be more powerful in these cases? So I knew in my head how to give birth, but I didn't know all of the other layers of what I was going to need. I hadn't really talked to anybody else about it. And so it just became my story of how it became. But that doesn't need to be that way. Do we need to feel so separate when 300,000 kids are born every day, right? It's a very natural process. This sculpture is made of basalt of a woman giving birth, and this was created between 500 and 1000 AD. So women have been birthing since the beginning of our species, not laying on her back. She's using gravity, right, to help the baby come out. So there are different ways of, I was laying on my back trying to push against who knows what, with the drugs, like not feeling anything. So how is it that we can celebrate and honor the way that our bodies are made? So it comes to this time, 10 years after Isaac was born, and I am pregnant with my son, Henry. And I knew with my whole being that I had to change my story because I could not go into this birth being scared. If I was going to be scared, things were not going to go well. My body, what we've talked about, all those things in our body that when we are scared, it creates these reactions in us of being very closed. And if there's one process to be open for, this is it. So there are a lot of you in this room. Some of you will birth someday, and some of you are going to be helpers. Whether you are a friend, whether you are in a relationship with someone, you are going to need to know and be a listening ear or expressing your ideas. Your attitudes will approach or will affect the people that you are with and how they approach. So you have a lot of power in knowing about this. So by changing my story, I could have a different experience. I use this fabulous book called Birthing from Within. I talked to women about their experiences. I heard lots of birth stories. I did art projects to light up different parts of my brain about the possibilities of this. I came to understand that I didn't fail me or Isaac the first time. It was just that that was our story and that I had capacity to learn from that. So I could unlearn what happened then and create some new learning, some relearning. So I reviewed books about anatomy, understanding what happens inside. So rather than just thinking, oh, yeah, that'll happen, like my cervix will open, like really thinking about imagining what that's like. So the baby is up here, right, in this uterus, and it needs to come out through the cervix. Do you see the cervix is usually like this? It's usually pretty closed. So it needs to open up. That cervix is a sphincter. And sphincters, you all use them every day when you pee and poop. You open sphincters, you let out what is in there, and then it closes again. That's what happens with the cervix. It is a sphincter. It needs to open up and let the baby out. So how do we let that happen as it happens naturally? Right? So if you are expecting pain and being afraid and being closed, then it's going to be very challenging to let that. Think about, oh, I remember. The other day I asked you how many of you could poop outside, right? I got the impression that that might be a little scary for some of you. And so that sphincter, sometimes you have to let it open to let out, right? And if you're afraid, pooping outside is not going to go so well. So this is a similar sort of story. So I practiced hypnobirthing, the idea that I could go into a relaxed state and let my body do its job. A strategy relaxing that is healthy during pregnancy and then also during labor. I changed my language around the whole process. Rather than contractions, they are uterine surges. They are serving a purpose. They're pushing the baby down. And so it's not that they're contracting and being painful, it's that they're serving a purpose. Rather than holding my breath, breathing the baby down. Like every time I took a breath, I thought about how much I could help Henry to get himself out with my breath. Rather than my water breaking, it was my baby signaling readiness for birth, right? It's not a scary thing. It's just what happens to get the process moving. And then rather than the most painful thing I get to experience, it's the hardest thing that I ever get to do. So when we change our language, it changes our beliefs about how the experience, this could be true for lots of experiences. And so here's Henry. It was also in a hospital, also with a midwife, the same system, also in the wrong position. And yet, using hypnobirthing techniques, being able to change my story, focusing on the beautiful opening of my body to allow for his exit was so much better. And I moved around a lot. I changed positions a lot. I sat down, I walked around, I squatted, all the different things to get the body moving and active. My relaxation allowed him to turn at the last moment before he was born. And the coolest part of it was that it worked, right? The baby, because I could feel when those contractions would come, Henry's feet were right here up inside my uterus, and I could feel him pushing himself out. So, you know, when a newborn is born, you push on the bottoms of their feet. That's a reflex that's important for birthing. So when the uterus pushes on their feet inside, they push against it, and Henry pushed himself out. So the system worked, and I was ecstatic. I started laughing. My husband thought I was crazy, but the idea that I could feel all of that and that I was able to change my story was such a relief. And so understanding how powerful knowledge is, but how powerful emotions are, how powerful our bodies are, is really enlivening. You can change the story, right? You don't know how to give birth, you can know how to use all of your equipment to do this. You will be a patient. Actually, you'll be a participant. I get to make choices in how this happens. You may be numbed with painkillers, or you can learn how to meet your discomfort. Birthing will be incredibly painful versus birthing will be really hard. Birthing is to be survived versus birthing can be an ecstatic experience. So I was experiencing ecstasy because I changed my story from assuming that I would know how to do this to actually feeling all of my parts, right? Being in tune with my mind and my body and my soul, my spirit, right? My intuition, all of that. So I'm sure if we liken this to running a marathon, I could walk outside, you know, and just start going 26.2 miles and it would be okay, but I've done no training for that. And so what happens if I actually spend some time in the idea or supporting my partner in the idea of birthing? So to have a C-section, don't miss my point, to have a C-section is not wrong. I'm not saying any of it is wrong. I'm saying there are a lot of different ways, a lot of different things that will happen. 300,000 different people give birth every day, and everyone is different. My point is to encourage you to ask questions of your providers, of your friends, of people that you know, of your mom, of your dad. What were their experiences, right? It helps you to inform your choices as you move through being part of this part of Earth's cycles. So I'm curious, you know, do you know your birth story? It might be interesting for you to ask about what that was like. So this part of being part of Earth, the idea that we connect, we birth, we continue life, it's also related to this part of it. Eating is receiving nutrients. Earth, water, fire, air, and space combine to make this food. We take the lives and labor of numberless beings that we may eat. May we be nourished that we may nourish life. So that last line, take a moment and talk to your partner about what that means for you. So what does this mean for you or for your neighbor?
So may we be nourished the way that we may nourish life. I think this connects back to the earlier quote in the beginning of the lecture when it says nature doesn't need people, people need nature. So when we give back to nature and we take care of our planet and we, celebrate and cherish our planet, nature is going to give back to us with nutrients, with foods, and with it's going to help support our lives and support our nature and support who we are as people.
Beautiful. Thank you. Well said. Thank you. Other takes on this quote?
I interpreted it as applicable to like birth, but also life as like a larger thing. So relating it to birth, it could be like whatever you eat and how nourished you are translates to your baby or whatever life you're creating. So like this is kind of like a harsh example, but like if you eat like crap, then your baby will be less nourished than if you're trying to eat a balanced diet and like actually fueling your body and your baby. And then outside of birth, it's applicable in the same way. So like if you spend a lot of extra time on your mental health or your physical health or anything else, then that area of your life will be a lot more nourished and taken care of. Whereas if you neglect certain parts of your life, then they will just not be as strong naturally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I feel like there's a lot to unpack in this one sentence. Yeah.
I interpret the quote as people having like a hierarchy of needs. So starting with physical needs, people need like food, water, and shelter, and they need all of these things before they can get to like mental needs. So I think relating it to birth, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not in a good physical place, you're not going to be able to take care of the baby because it may start well at first, but the more you neglect yourself, eventually that neglect is going to start to manifest itself into other people and the relationships around you.
Yes, thank you. There's somebody right behind you, so pass that up. Thank you. Yeah, nourishment.
I believe a lot in karma and dharma. So what I put into life is going to come back to me. So if I am positive, all the positive things are going to come back to me.
Different kind of nourishment. Lovely. Yeah. Other thoughts? So nourishment, you might want to just write that word in your journal. What does it mean to be nourished in order to nourish life? It's a pretty, I really like thinking about this concept. So in this case, we're thinking about this from an angle of nourishment related to what we talked about last week. The idea of our relationship with dirt, right? We are this. We are this. We all have this deep relationship with dirt, whether you choose to acknowledge it or not. Carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen, all the heavy elements are all part of the soil. Soil is nutrients, the medium that holds it all, right? And shares it with the plants that share it with us. So we get our nourishment from the food that we eat that builds up our bodies. And then we are made then of those same nutrients. We've considered that directly related to peeing and pooping and blood. And now thinking about this from the perspective of from birth to death, the nourishment that we take in. So thinking about death can be a really challenging topic, right? I grew up essentially in a cemetery. My grandfather was the caretaker of a cemetery across the street from his house. And so So that cemetery is where I learned to fly kites and where we walk the dog every day and where I learned to drive. It's also that I traveled to a lot of different cemeteries with my grandpa. His job was to change the dates. After somebody passed away, he would carve the dates into the monuments for their life. And so I spent a lot of childhood time in cemeteries and appreciating just being outside with my grandpa, right? That was truly nourishing to me. But understanding that there was just this cycle of life and of death and what that means as we move through those stages. So we're going to talk about that, right? Apart of or apart from, which is it? This is a photo of a body wrapped in a shroud, ready to be placed in the ground. Take a moment and talk to your partner about your feelings about this image. What comes up for you?
That's what I'm saying. Like, I've never seen something like that. Please think about it that way.
So may we be nourished that we may nourish life. This person is ready now to nourish life, part of that cycle, right? The movement and exchange of organic and inorganic materials back into the production of matter. The way that a society buries their dead tells a big story. So in my experience of living and talking with people, sometimes there's a real fear of death, sometimes a disconnect from how we are part of this cycle, and separation. And so if we think about a different way of doing this, this I think is becoming more popular. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the more traditional way of burying people is this corpse preservation method. So the body is laid naked on a stainless steel table, embalmer's table, and then these steps completely drain the body of blood, extract all organs, inject embalming solution through the carotid artery, inject embalming solution into the abdominal cavity, inject embalming solution into the femoral artery, dry the body naturally, apply cosmetics to the face to hide discoloration, and chemicals to prevent decomposition. So the chemicals, embalming solution is made of formaldehyde, glutaraldehyde, and methanol, which is in the EPA's top 10 list of environmentally hazardous chemicals. It's a carcinogen in humans and other animals. And the people that do this, the mortuary workers, they have a higher incidence of nasal cancer, leukemia, heart disease, diseases of the respiratory system, and suicide. And then all of these chemicals are going into, into the ground. So why do we go through all of this, right? Why do we try to keep the body from decomposing? Does anybody have anything they want to say about that? There's somebody over here.
I feel like it comes from the fear of death that we have and like letting go of people and letting them return fully to the cycle that we've been talking about and just trying to hold on to that memory of them that we have of their physical body and trying to keep that around so it feels less permanent than it really is.
That was beautifully said. Thank you. Yeah, so we do it for us, right? To keep the body from decomposing because might be afraid of what might be happening, right? Being afraid of how we might react to the change that happens. So we put toxins in our loved ones so that they look good, so that they look alive. This process was made common during the Civil War, so quite a long time ago. So the American cemetery, natural on the surface, right? But then all of what's underneath there, after viewing, the body is sealed inside this metal casket or a lacquered wooden coffin, and then lowered into a concrete vault and buried. The reinforced concrete tomb is covered with a ton of dirt and planted with a monoculture of grass, which is kept artificially green with pesticides and weed killers. So above ground, cemeteries can look very peaceful and natural and green, and yet for all intents and purposes, it's kind of a hazardous waste area and non-biodegradable materials. So in my growing up, in all the time that I spent in cemeteries, I never really thought about that, right? It was just what culture said that we do for people, with people. And so it's just readily accepted that we do this. So what about cremation then? What about that story? The burning of the body is another alternative. It's become traditional, almost as common, as traditional burial in the United States. In fact, about more than half of Americans choose cremation. So the body is placed in a vessel that's combustible yet strong enough to hold the weight. The cremation takes place in a specially designed furnace, referred to as the cremation chamber or retort, exposed to temperatures up to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, leaving behind only ashes. The body then cools and the remains can be handled. The remains are inspected for any metal remnants that may have been left behind that surgically were placed into the body during life. The metal is removed by hand or by strong magnets and often sent for recycling. The cremated remains are ground down and into the final resulting ashes. And so the important environmental consideration here is that it takes about a lot of energy, the amount of energy to burn a body like this. The math computes to about 28 gallons of fossil fuels. So that would take me to Miami, Florida in my Honda Fit to burn one body. So non-renewable contributes to some of the issues that we'll talk about soon, that overuse of fossil fuels. So it's important to know that there are other options, right? This is a body tree bag. So the body is placed in here and then planted. So that it's an Italian product, started in 2017. So that is out there, except that you really don't even have to purchase a product. A brief relating story. This is my goofy, fun-loving dog, Winston. I came home one day and Winston was obviously sick. He was not doing well at all. It was a cold day. I carried him inside. I built a fire in the fireplace and I laid Winston on his pillow. And we were all there. The three boys and I were all around in the kitchen and sort of living life and simultaneously celebrating Winston's life. I had called the vet, but it was very obvious that there was nothing that we could do for Winston. So as we did our lives of hanging out with him, my oldest son, Isaac, that you just heard about, curled up with Winston and laid with him while he died. And so, yes, Winston is just a dog, right? But we were able to make this really beautiful dance almost of life and death. The idea of some music playing, some quiet atmosphere by the fireplace, all together celebrating life, and then moving Winston into his death. And then we buried him in the backyard under the trees where he loved to play. So is this a transferable story? Can we transfer this to us? So this quick video is another way of considering burials.
In a world increasingly conscious of its ecological footprint, grave burials present a harmonious alternative to traditional burial methods. Grave burial, also known as natural burial, allows a body to decompose naturally, returning to the earth in the most eco-friendly way possible. But how long does a body last in a grave burial? The answer lies in the embrace of nature. Unlike traditional burials, grave burials forego embalming chemicals, metal casters, and concrete bolts. This allows for a faster, more natural decomposition process. The decomposition process in a grave burial can vary. Factors like soil composition, climate, and depth of burial play a crucial role. In ideal conditions, a body can return to the earth within a few years. This process nurtures new life as nutrients are recycled into the soil. Grave burials not only honor our loved ones, but also respect the plant, leaving a living legacy. In embracing earth with grave burials, we find a beautiful balance between life, death, and the natural world. Learn more about grave burials and sustainable choices for our final journey to riverburials.com.
So the human body, right, at death, is there a sense of rejoining the natural cycles of life? Is there separation, or is there connection, right? These are going to be things to think about, things for you to consider as you move through your days. Understanding life is a matter of choices, and every choice you make makes you. This week, your discussion question, it will be posted. It's about those connections to cycles, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. Thank you very much. Have a beautiful day. So I don't know how the lights came on. Did you do something? Autumn, she looked at me, yeah. And